What if the biggest moment is not the revaluation itself, but the first few minutes after happens? That is the question smart Dinar holders keep asking in 2026. And it is the reason this topic matters so much right now. A lot of people focus only on the dream rate, the big number, and the idea of life-changing money. But the real test is not whether a currency moves. The real test is whether you have a clear exit plan before emotions take over. That is where many investors get trapped. They wait too long. They listen to loud voices online, and they forget that major financial events are usually handled through real banks, real rules, real timelines, and real paperwork. So today I want to slow this down and walk through the kind of quiet exit strategy serious people think about before anything changes.
This is not about hype.
This is about calm staying organized, and understanding what could happen if the market ever opens in a way that forces fast decisions. The people who prepare early often make better choices than the people who chase rumors later. The first thing every holder should understand is that a currency event is not just a price change on a screen. It is a process. If the Iraqi dinar ever moves into a new value structure, there will likely be rules, limits, and procedures around how the exchange is handled. That means people should not build a plan around fantasy. They should build a plan around what governments and banks normally do when money changes form. In most major currency changes, there is a window, there is documentation, and there is a controlled way to move old notes into the new system. That is why the smartest investors do not think in terms of someday, I will just walk in and get rich. They think in terms of timing, access, safety, and confirmation. They ask questions like, where would I go? What would I bring? How would I protect myself? What tax issues could show up? What bank policies might apply? These are not exciting questions, but they are the questions that matter when the noise gets loud and the stakes get real. A quiet exit strategy is built on preparation, not emotion. One reason people get confused is that they hear so many different theories about what a revaluation would look like. Some people talk as if there will be no rules at all. Others speak as if every holder will receive the same treatment everywhere, no matter what country they are in or what amount they hold. That is not how financial systems usually work. Real currency exchange events are usually tied to central bank policy, banking procedures, anti-money laundering rules, identity checks, and transaction records. Even if a currency becomes more valuable, that does not erase the normal structure of the banking world. It does not remove reporting rules. It does not remove the need for proof of identity. It does not remove the need for a clean record. So the calm investor does not ask, how can I beat the system? The calm investor asks, how can I move through the system safely and correctly? That mindset changes everything. It keeps people from making risky choices based on rumor, and it helps them stay focused on what can actually be done if a major event ever arrives. Now, let's talk about the biggest mistake people make. Waiting too long. A lot of holders imagine that if a currency ever revalues, they will have endless time to decide what to do. In real life, that is rarely how major financial events work. There is usually a beginning, a middle, and an end. There is often a formal exchange period, and after that period closes, the options can change fast. That is why a quiet exit strategy starts before the event, not after it. You do not want to be making your first plan while everyone else is panicking. You want a simple, practical path already in your mind. That path may include choosing a large, stable financial institution, keeping your records organized, knowing who your tax advisor will be, and understanding what type of account you might need. It may also mean deciding in advance how much you would exchange first, how you would secure the rest, and how you would avoid drawing attention to yourself. When money becomes a headline, calm becomes an advantage. And when a currency event hits, the person who already thought about the exit is usually better positioned than the person still trying to figure out what a bank even wants. Another part of the quiet exit strategy is understanding that not every bank behaves the same way. People often talk about the big banks because larger institutions tend to have stronger systems, more liquidity, more experience with foreign exchange, and more compliance infrastructure. That does not mean every large bank is perfect. It does mean that when a serious currency exchange event happens, scale and stability matter. A small local bank may not be the best place for a very large, unusual transaction. A well-established bank may be more prepared to handle unusual volume reporting and documentation. The point is not to guess which name is best in a vacuum. The point is to think ahead about where a serious exchange would likely be handled with the least friction. That is why many investors keep talking about the major national banks. They believe those institutions are more likely to be equipped for unusual financial activity. Whether that proves true or not, the strategy is understandable. Choose the path that looks most organized, most stable, and most familiar to the system. That is what serious money usually likes. The safest approach is never to assume that a bank will just take your currency and do everything instantly with no questions asked. Real banks ask questions. They verify identity. They may ask about the source of the funds. They may want to know where the currency came from and how long you held it. That is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to be prepared. A good exit strategy includes keeping receipts, purchase records, dealer information, and any papers that show the history of your holdings. If you ever need to explain what you have, clear records can save time and reduce stress. People who ignore paperwork often create their own problems later. People who stay organized usually move through the process more smoothly. So this is one of the quiet truths smart investors watch closely. The deal is not only about value. It is about documentation. When large amounts of money move, paperwork becomes part of the money itself. If you have the right records, you are already ahead of the crowd. If you do not, you may end up stuck answering questions you were not ready for. A lot of people also talk about special locations, private centers, or secret channels where they believe currency exchanges might happen. That kind of talk spreads fast because people want to believe there is a hidden doorway that gives them a better deal. But serious investors need to be careful with anything that sounds too mysterious. When a financial event is real, the process usually becomes more official, not less. It becomes more visible, not more secret. It becomes more documented, not more random. That is why the quiet exit strategy does not depend on fantasy centers or private rumors. It depends on ordinary financial behavior, normal banking structure, and realistic expectations. If there is an exchange process, it will likely be dead to recognized institutions, identity checks, compliance steps, and formal handling. The louder a claim sounds, the more carefully it should be checked. Smart holders do not chase every story. They wait for the structure to show itself. That attitude protects them from false promises and keeps them from putting their trust in ideas that were never real in the first place. There is also the issue of safety. If someone holds a large amount of physical currency and a real exchange event happens, the risk does not disappear just because the notes may be more valuable. In fact, the risk can increase because the notes themselves become more important. That is why a quiet strategy often includes thinking about transport, privacy, and timing. You do not want to move carelessly. You do not want to create unnecessary attention. You do not want to walk around with a lot of cash-like value without a plan. A serious investor thinks about how to protect the asset before moving it. That may mean making an appointment instead of showing up unannounced. It may mean dividing the process into steps instead of doing everything at once. It may mean speaking carefully and only sharing information with the people who need to know. The goal is not fear. The goal is control. When people move with control, they reduce the chance of panic, confusion, or mistakes. That is what makes the strategy quiet and smart at the same time. One of the biggest debates in this space is about fees and spreads. People often forget that exchanging currency is rarely free, especially when large amounts are involved. Banks and financial institutions may use spreads, service charges, or exchange differences that affect the final number you receive. That is why smart holders do not just think about the headline rate. They think about the net result after all costs are considered. A big number can shrink quickly if the fees are high. Even a small percentage difference can matter a lot when the amount is large. This is another reason why preparation matters. If you understand that charges may apply, you can ask better questions when the time comes. You can compare institutions more carefully. You can avoid being surprised. You can build your expectations around reality instead of wishful thinking. The quiet exit strategy is not just about selling. It is about preserving as much value as possible after the system takes its share. And that is a real investor concern. And it deserves real attention. Taxes are another major piece of the puzzle. A lot of people talk about what the tax treatment might be, but they often speak too confidently about something that can depend on structure, jurisdiction, timing, and individual circumstances. That is why the smart move is not to guess. The smart move is to prepare for the possibility that taxes will matter and to have a plan for that day. Many cautious investors think in terms of setting aside a portion of any gain until they know exactly what their tax position is. That may sound conservative, but conservative is not a bad word when large money is involved. In fact, caution can be a strength. If someone gets a sudden windfall and spends everything before understanding the tax impact, they may create a bigger problem than the gain itself. The quiet exit strategy respects the fact that the government may have a claim. An accountant may need to be involved, and the final outcome may not be what people in comment sections are promising. So the serious approach is simple. Do not spend before you understand, and do not assume the final number belongs entirely to you until the paperwork is done. What should a holder actually do before any revaluation event? The answer starts with organization. Keep your purchase records together. Know how much you hold. Know where it is stored. Know who you would call first. Know which bank or banks you would even consider using. Know who your accountant or tax professional would be. Know what questions you would ask before walking in. If a real event happens, people will be under pressure. Pressure makes people forget things. That is why a written plan matters. Even a simple checklist can help you stay focused when emotions are high. The person who plans ahead does not need to think from zero when the moment arrives. They already have a direction. That is what this whole quiet strategy is about. Not panic, not hype, not fantasy, direction. If the market changes, your mind should not be changing with every rumor. Your plan should stay steady while the noise moves around you. That is the kind of discipline that protects both money and peace of mind. There is also a lesson in history that smart people never ignore. Major currency events are usually more controlled than social media makes them seem. When a country changes notes, withdraws old currency, introduces new denominations, or restructures its system, there is usually a formal process behind it. The public may not see every detail, but that does not mean there are no rules. There are almost always rules. And because of that, it is dangerous to build a strategy around extreme claims. If someone says there will be no documentation, no time limit, no banking structure, and no compliance process, that should raise a red flag. Real money systems do not usually work like that. They usually move in controlled stages. So, the smart holder looks for signs of structure, not signs of fantasy. They watch for the parts that are official, measurable, and repeatable. That is the quiet investor's advantage. They do not need the loudest story. They need the most believable one. That makes them harder to fool and better prepared if anything ever changes. A quiet exit strategy also means thinking about what not to do. Do not rush into because someone sounds confident. Do not rely on anonymous claims. And do not hand over physical currency to someone's because they promise to handle it later. Do not assume the internet knows more than the financial system. And do not let excitement erase your common sense. These warnings matter because hope can make people careless. The best investors are not the loudest. They are the most disciplined. They know that a real opportunity does not require reckless behavior. It requires thoughtful behavior. If the revaluation happens, the people who move carefully will likely have fewer problems than the people who chased every rumor. The quiet strategy is really a protection strategy. It protects your money from confusion. It protects your time from wasted effort. It protects your mind from emotional decisions. And in a market driven by speculation, protection is often the most valuable thing you can have. For many holders, the emotional side is the hardest part. They have waited a long time. They have heard a lot of predictions. They have probably watched other people speak with great confidence about things that never happened. That kind of history can make people impatient or suspicious. Both reactions are dangerous. Impatience can make you act too early. Suspicion can make you ignore real information when it finally appears. The quiet exit strategy keeps both emotions under control. It tells you to stay patient without becoming blind. It tells you to stay hopeful without becoming reckless. That balance is hard, but it is powerful. In 2026, with so much noise still circulating, balance may be the rarest skill of all. The holders who keep their cool are the ones most likely to think clearly when the pressure rises. And clear thinking is what you need if the event ever moves from theory into reality. If the revaluation does happen, the first wave will probably bring confusion before clarity. That is normal. Big financial changes often create a burst of questions, rumors, and rush decisions. Some people will celebrate too early, some will panic, some will freeze. That is exactly why a pre-built exit strategy matters so much. It gives you something solid to lean on when everyone else is bouncing between emotions. You do not want your first decision to be your worst decision. You want your first decision to be the one that keeps your options open. That may mean exchanging a portion first and observing the process. It may mean speaking with a banker before doing anything major. It may mean waiting for verification before assuming the story is complete. In a moment like that, speed matters, but matters more. Moving quickly is not the same thing as moving well. The smart investor knows the difference. Another important part of the plan is understanding liquidity. People like to talk about value, but value only matters if it can be accessed and handled properly. If a currency becomes more valuable, the question becomes, how easy is it to convert, deposit, secure, or move that value in a way that makes sense? Liquidity is a huge part of that. A larger bank may be better positioned to process a large event. A small institution may struggle. That is why the choice of where to go matters so much. It is not just about a logo on the building. It is about whether the institution can actually manage the size, the scrutiny, and the paperwork. This is also why a quiet exit strategy does not rely on the idea that every bank will respond the same way. Different institutions have different systems, different comfort levels, and different procedures. Smart investors take that seriously. They do not assume convenience. They look for capacity. That is a real-world approach. And real-world thinking is what keeps people grounded. Many people also overlook the importance of timing in a different way. They think only about the day it happens, but not about what happens after. The days after a major currency event can matter just as much as the first hour. There may be new information, updated rules, or changing bank behavior. That means the strategy should not only answer how do I get in, but also how do I manage what comes next. That includes tax planning, storage, investment decisions, and perhaps even a pause before making any big moves. A quiet investor does not assume they must decide everything immediately. They understand that sometimes the best move is to secure the outcome first, and then think carefully about the next step. That mindset prevents emotional spending and protects long-term stability. In other words, the exit strategy is not really an exit from money. It is an exit from uncertainty into structure. This is also where discipline with information becomes powerful. There will always be people who claim to know the exact timing, the exact rate, and the exact path. Some may sound convincing. Some may sound spiritual. Some may sound official, but the smart holder keeps a filter in place. They separate opinion from fact. They separate hope from evidence. They separate rumor from process. That does not mean they become negative. It means they become careful. And careful is better than gullible. If a real event ever comes, the people who kept their heads will be in a much stronger position than those who spent years following every loud prediction. This is why a quiet strategy is so valuable. It trains you to think before the event, not after the mistake. It gives you a way to act without chaos. And in a high-stakes moment, that may be the biggest edge of all. The final piece is simple, but it matters. Do not confuse a dream with a plan. A dream says one day this will change everything. A plan says if it changes here, is exactly how I will respond. That difference is huge. The dream is emotional. The plan is practical. The dream can inspire you. The plan can protect you. Smart investors keep both, but they never let the dream replace the plan. That is why this quiet exit strategy is so important in 2026. It reminds people to stay grounded, stay ready, and stay calm. If the Iraqi dinar ever moves into a new reality, the people who thought ahead will not need to panic. They will already know where they are going, what they are doing, and what they are avoiding.
That is the real advantage.
Not noise, not speed, not rumors, preparation. And that is why so many careful holders are watching quietly, waiting patiently, and building a plan long before the moment arrives.